really cold. But we're going to get cracking and
Your 1 minute.
warm up in 1 minute. I can see we now have the transcript going, which is great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Um,
and I think people can choose whether they have it on their screens or not. So,
got
uh-huh.
you. That's great. I might just take it off my screen because I have so many things on my screen. Just one
She,
second.
she's not.
Um,
But
um, 1 second. I'm sorry. Let me just try and. Oh, crumbs. Okay, I can't take it off my screen, but that's okay. We
very, very warm welcome to everybody who's here with us today. We will start at one, which is in just a few seconds' time, probably.
Yes, and in the meantime, we are live. It is Monday lunchtime. Do let us know how you are, where you are. Welcome to everybody. We're excited to get cracking. We've been away for a few weeks, so it's really good to get back into it. The chat box is open. I'm just going to move that to the right screen. And yep,
One
we will
o'clock.
get going. Are we recording, Ruth?
I have pressed record. So,
Okay,
fantastic.
great. Well, let's get going then, shall we? Um, Welcome everybody to our Live Well Live webinar this Monday lunchtime. We are the lifestyle medicine team here at Boots Online Doctor. Um, we are absolutely thrilled to be with you today. My name is Dr. Samantha Wellapilly. I am the clinical lead for the lifestyle medicine team here at Boots Online Doctor. I'm a GP, I'm a yoga therapist and a coach. I'm also a meditation teacher, and I'm really passionate about supporting you on your journeys to better health via weight loss, but really, really here to support you pretty much every week to have a space where you can contact us, you can ask your questions, and hopefully we can support you the best way we can with some good evidence-based practice. And I'm joined by Ruth, our nurse and nutritionist.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, everyone. I was just looking in the chat box. Lots of hellos in there. Lovely to hear from you and see where you're all based. Up in Scotland and Anglesey and in the States. So that's very great. Really lovely to have you here. I am Ruth Taylor. I am the nutritionist and a registered nurse with the lifestyle medicine team for the Boots Online Doctor. Really love doing these webinars. It's our opportunity really to bring you some sort of really clear advice, hopefully, and to cut through all of the chatter and the confusion that there is out there around this whole weight loss world. Really, it is your opportunity as well to bring your questions that you may already have or that you may discover during the course of the webinar. So do feel free to ask us your questions. You can ask us by popping those straight into the Q&A box. If you can put them into the Q&A box, it really helps us to find them. I know that the people tend to write questions in the chat box as well, and we do search as much as we possibly can for those, but we sometimes can miss those. Just to let you know as well, for the purposes of the webinar, because this is an open forum, we do not answer any sort of personalised medication questions that come up for you. If you do have those, we recommend that you go back to your medication provider. This isn't a webinar solely for people who are on medications, by the way. And to let you know, we've got two or three polls for you today. They're completely anonymous. It really is just so we get a flavour of who's here, whether you've been here before, whether this is your first time, this is the first webinar for today. And we just thought it'd be really interesting for us to know, whether you're repeat offenders, whether you've been with us before, and also, it's your opportunity as well to tell us what you need from us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Without further ado, we shall get on with the content of today. So today we are talking all about cravings. We're talking all about what causes them, how to control them, and their importance really it's important to understand what these are. So I'm going to let Ruth take away our take it away with our first slide.
Brilliant. And we'll leave that poll there for a few more minutes while we're talking this through, and then we'll have a look at your questions. So, yeah, today's webinar is a really important subject and often one which can, these cravings can really play a significant role in our health, in our weight management, and also in the choices that we make around the food that we eat. And what we know is that cravings can play a significant role in weight management. So, what is a craving? A craving, interestingly enough, is something that's quite separate to natural hunger. So, it's a strong desire to eat a specific food. So, you often get that sort of like munchy feeling, that sort of like absolute driving requirement to eat something in particular. And often it's those less healthy snacks like crisps or chocolates or desserts or sweet treats like, pastries and cakes and all of those things. So, what does the research tell us about why we experience cravings? So, what we know is that cravings can be triggered because we're stressed. It can be because we are sort of eating the wrong foods a little bit too regularly. So, perhaps we're eating those high sugar, high glycemic index foods, and that sort of sets us up on this blood sugar roller coaster. Sam, you're going to talk to us a bit about that in a minute, I think. We also knew that eating those sugary foods can cause blood sugar spikes and crashes, which can lead to more cravings. So, we really want you to start thinking about what's going on for you today if you're having cravings and why that might be. And we know that the issue of cravings is much more common than we think. So, let's have a look. We've got a little poll. We'd love to hear from you. Again, this is completely anonymous. We'd love to know whether you're experiencing cravings, whether this is relevant for you, and how relevant, really. It can also be that those cravings could be triggered by adverts. It could be adverts on TV, on the radio, or billboards that we see when we're driving down the road. So, people who are more likely to experience cravings are people who are stressed, people who are eating those high sugar foods regularly, or people who are perhaps really trying to boost their mood. So, perhaps you've got some low mood or some anxiety going on, and that can be one of the reasons that you're experiencing those cravings as well. So it's really important for us to be thinking about that. So let's have a look. From those of you who've taken part in the poll, cravings seem to be quite a big issue. So 60% of you are saying that, let's have a look. I'll end the poll in a minute, but around 60% of you are saying that you're having cravings most days. Goodness me, and that they can be a major challenge for 70% of the people who've taken part in the poll. So thank you so much. So stress, yeah, that really correlates with what the research tells us. Stress seems to be the biggest factor for many of you. Lack of sleep, skipping meals, not eating properly, goodness, yeah. So it really, really stacks up, doesn't it? The research is real. And actually, interestingly, of the people who are answering this poll today, so around 70 of you so far, it's sweet foods that you tend to run for, or the sort of carbohydrate-rich snacks. So let's see how we're sharing this. Let's end the poll and share the results. So it's really interesting for everybody to see this. I find that it's really helpful for us to know as well that it is quite relevant for everyone who's here today, in terms of only two people so far have said that they aren't really affected by cravings. So, Sam, over to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So just go into a little bit of the physiology behind our hunger and our satiety. So we can think about these two hormones that we have whizzing around our system. So we've got leptin as well, let's talk about leptin, which is one of our major appetite regulators. And when it's working as it should, it will send a signal to our appetite control center in the brain to tell you that you are full and you can stop eating now, okay? Because you have reached a point where you're comfortably full. However, leptin can stop being quite so effective, and this is known as leptin resistance. And there are three main reasons, and you can link these to your poll answers, okay? Um, Too much stress, too little sleep, and really having a lot of those high glycemic, high sugar foods, which we'll talk about in just a moment. In leptin resistance, we don't respond to that being full signal, okay, which is kind of the off switch for our appetite. All right. And as a result, it's much more likely that we will overeat. Leptin is made by the fat cells of our body, and when it's released, this is the hormone that triggers that feeling of fullness. And if we begin to become resistant to that trigger, you can imagine it can have negative impacts on the body. And one of those is also not being able to respond as well to insulin, our sugar storage hormone, which in turn can lead to insulin resistance. That can go on to type 2 diabetes. So I just wanted to talk to everyone here a little bit more about stress because I know it was a big thing that came up as a cause for our cravings, our need to somehow relieve that stress with eating something sweet. That seemed to be quite a common pattern amongst us. And it's not an unusual pattern at all, actually. It seems to be something that's actually a bit wired into our physiology if we look at it more in more detail. So if we think a bit more about stress and the impact it has on our body and on our hormones, it can have a big impact on what we eat. If we have a lot of stress in our lives, we know that a hormone called cortisol is triggered. And cortisol can lead to cravings and wanting to take in more energy dense foods, okay, which tend to be in our modern world those more highly processed and sugary foods, okay, and this compounds the problem of leptin resistance. So in turn, it impacts your hunger center not fully receiving that message of that's enough, you're full now, you don't need to have any more. So just bearing those in mind, I think sort of as a bit of a tangent, I think the impact of stress and chronic stress and stress that has impacted us over our lives is becoming more and more kind of a real culprit for many health conditions, especially metabolic ones. And being overweight, overeating is one of them. So we all know that stress is part of our lives. We can't really, and none of us can go through our lives without stress. But I think, having this awareness and recognizing where stress is impacting our eating patterns can be really valuable when we're on a health journey like this one.
Yeah, it's a really important point. And I guess thinking about emotional cravings as well is a really key element of what we all need to be thinking about and understanding what's going on for us. I guess we've all experienced hunger where eating anything will suffice. And what makes food cravings different from hunger is how specific they can be. We were talking about this just now. I think what we find is with a craving, we don't really want to eat anything. It's not that we're hungry. Instead, we want to eat something in particular. So it could be barbecue potato crisps. It could be cookie dough ice cream. It could be, I don't know, a type of chocolate that you particularly love. I think many of us experience those cravings from time to time, but for certain people, having cravings all of the time can really pose significant health issues because it's potentially going to be a real factor in your weight management and really can be a tripper upper, in terms of really getting you where you want to be. If you're giving into those cravings very regularly, then it's going to potentially have quite a big health impact. So we know that food cravings are much more likely to sort of trigger off people to be a little bit more orientated towards binge eating. That doesn't mean to say that you have an eating disorder. It just means that perhaps you really can regularly overeat. And this is a really tricky subject and can be quite an emotional subject to grapple with. So, really be kind to yourselves when you start thinking about this and really think about, okay, is this something that's going on for me? Do I need to be really honest with myself here? And just open the door gently on yourselves. But what we know is that sort of constant sort of craving and giving into those cravings and that binging that can happen at that time can really lead you down that road to being obese and to eating disorders. It can also be that when we give into overeating and we give into those cravings, it can make us feel really emotionally not great. We can feel guilty, we can feel very bad about ourselves. And I think Sam and I are really keen that you own this, but actually that you don't judge yourself for it because this isn't about bringing judgment. This is just about recognizing the pattern that you may have gotten into. So, one of the things that happens in our brains is we have these chemicals which are our neurotransmitters, and they're our sort of lifter uppers, our feel good neurotransmitters. So, we can have serotonin and dopamine, and these respond to junk foods that we eat in the same way as something weird happening with my laptop here. So, I'm just going to move a few things. Um, in the same way as sort of street drugs or cocaine or heroin. So, actually, interestingly enough, when we have sugar, it can give us a real lift in our mood, and we can almost start craving that lift or that boost in our mood. And actually, similarly to street drugs, the same amount will not contain us. So, we'll need to up the amount of sugar that we have that boost. So, it's a very, very challenging situation that we can find ourselves in. So these are all linked to our brain's reward pathways. They can override when we're feeling that sort of sense of craving. We can override our sense of fullness. We can just feel a craving just because of those emotional reasons. It's got nothing to do with our satiety. It's all to do with what's going on quite often in our heads and in terms of our emotional health. And we know that those who are addicted to people can become a little bit addicted to foods, and that's a really tricky story. They're still deciding whether food addiction is a real thing, but I think from what I read and from what I understand about a lot of people, that for many people, food does become a little bit addictive. You almost look at it as your crutch. We also thought it'd be really good to re-bring our attention back to this manufacturing of certain foods, because actually part of the story here is how foods are created. And in many of the man-made sort of ultra processed foods, they have this very high bliss point. And what that means is that foods have been created with the right amount of fat and sugar and or salt so that they become irresistible, and they become foods that we can eat that don't fill us up, but that we can just carry on eating. So, sort of like the once you pop, you just can't stop type of brigade. It's very true. You actually realistically can find it very difficult to stop, because those are very, very Moorish qualities of processed foods. And also, if you're prone to anxiety and depression, then you're much more likely to be prone to hormone fluctuations. So, all of this will feed in to all of those factors as well. So, that's very timely, because Sam, you're going to talk all about blood sugar management and how this all links together, I think.
Yes, yes. So this graph or these two graphs really help us to understand our blood sugar balance over the day. And really, the crux of what we talk about in these webinars is about how to manage our blood sugars and how our blood sugar balance over the day impacts our eating habits. So you can see, let's look at the red side. So this is, for example, if you were to have sort of high glycemic or high quick release sugar snacks over the day. So you could see, say, for example, you had a chocolate brownie for breakfast. Okay, let's take this example on the red side. So if you ate that chocolate brownie and it would spike your sugar very quickly in your bloodstream, which what all that means is that it's very easy to digest by your system. That sugar is released super fast into your bloodstream. So you get this great big rush of sugar, fuel into your bloodstream. And the body needs to clear that away. And our insulin in response to that high sugar will be released in abundance to try and tidy away that excess fuel, store it away for later. Okay. And what what can happen is, and what often happens is that there's more insulin is released than is needed. So we end up having this little dip that you can see in that sort of lower point. You can see that sort of nice state, that black line halfway down the page shows that sort of nice, happy blood sugar that we want to keep. But you can see that if too much sugar is released into the bloodstream, the pancreas can kind of overshoot the mark, release a little bit too much insulin, and you end up actually dropping your blood sugar shortly after you eat. So this could be an hour, 2 hours after you've eaten, and you end up in this point where you feel really hungry. So you might notice this in your own experience. Having a sugary snack or something, or a sugary breakfast, and then noticing, actually, I am starving, an hour and a half later. Oh my goodness. And I'm irritable, I'm hangry, I might be a bit muddled and I can't really think about anything else. I'm not thinking as I'm quite irritable. I might not be thinking as clearly. I need something to pick me up. And then you end up, so that's why we call it this blood sugar roller coaster. You end up sort of scouring around for another snack to get your blood sugar up again. But if that snack is then a chocolate bar, for example, then you're on the roller coaster again, and your blood sugar will spike upwards. Your pancreas will kick into action and try and tidy away all that sugar to store that fuel for later in the liver, for example. And the same thing can happen. So you could see that over the course of a day, you could really end up overeating, feeling hungry so much, feeling hungry a lot of the day and eating more over the day. And if you're not aware of what's going on, you could see how this pattern could just occur unconsciously over the day. So let's move on to the green side, which is a much more pleasant way to spend your day. I think it's just a much slower energy release. So this, for example, let's say instead of that chocolate brownie, instead if you had a nice high protein breakfast. So for example, you could have maybe it was Greek yogurt with some fruit, with some fruit or dried fruit with some nuts. So you've got some lovely protein there, a bit of a mixture in there. And you had that for your breakfast. And what those components, so say if you had dried fruit in there, maybe you had some dried apricots in there as well. Those have really high fiber. So they might be quite sweet. For example, a dried apricot is sweet, but it's that sweetness is locked in a sort of matrix of fiber, which is going to be harder for the body to break down. So you don't get that massive rush of blood sugar, even though you're having something that's a little bit sweet. The nuts are great because you've got that protein. That protein that's bound up in the nuts is much takes longer and takes more energy for your body to break down. So that again, it's going to release its energy more slowly. And you've got that lovely Greek yogurt there, which will also have some lovely probiotics, which is sort of by the by, but will support your gut health. But also it's got some nice protein in there. So you've got some just this very slow release energy. So you can see on the curve on the green side that that is a much more gentle curve. You're not, your body, your pancreas can judge it much better. So you're not overshooting the mark when the blood sugars are tidied away and stored for later. It The blood sugar is released much more slowly. So the sugars from your food are released much more slowly. The body has time to adapt to tidy them away, and you don't end up with those huge swings in blood sugar, in cravings, in hunger, in irritability, hangriness, etc. So, really keeping your hunger at bay for a longer period. So that's really what we want to look at. We want to look at you feeling really satisfied with what you're eating, not feeling like, you're just eating and eating, eating, and it's not filling you up, and that hunger continues and then you can feel hungry all day. And we can all relate to that because, this might be news to many people that not knowing that, some processed foods are designed in this way to be that so moreish, but actually not filling you up. So you end up sort of chasing your tail, like on the red side, with that blood sugar. So we would love you to think about this so that you're more on the green side where you release your energy slowly from your food, you feel fuller for longer, and overall you eat less.
Yeah, very much so. And sort of one of the ways that you can do that is by following the core meal plan. So we could share the core meal plan. If anybody would like to download that, then we can share a link for that. And we have Rabdina here helping us today. Thank you, Rabdina. I didn't say thank you to you earlier, so thank you so much for being here. So
Thank you. And it's not complex as well. I think that's what we really want to make clear that it's really this sort of changing your eating habits. It's not anything complicated. It really is just understanding the building blocks that you're putting on your plate and then combining things in a way that really supports your health goals.
I think that's a really important point, isn't it? And I guess for us, because we talk about it a lot, it becomes less and less complicated. But honestly, it really is very simplistic. And I think we get so blinded by all the confusing messages, it becomes overwhelming, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I think how do we avoid these cravings? So I guess a bit like you were saying, Sam, we want to be eating in a way where we're balancing that blood glucose as much as we possibly can. We want to be balancing the amount of insulin that our bodies are having to produce, and that will really help in terms of supporting our appetite to come back into a more manageable level. So to do that, you want to really swap to those naturally lower sugar foods. Follow that core eating plan if you can. Sorry about my cough, or even the Mediterranean approach to eating, or a combination of those. Our core meal plan is something that we put together because it's the best of both worlds. It's sort of following the low glycemic, the low carb way of eating, but adding in all of those anti-inflammatory healthy fats. And we know that that is really consistent with long-term, a way of learning to eat that you can eat for the rest of your lives that is really healthy and that is for the long term. It's not a fad approach to changing how you eat. We want to move away from all of that fad world. So follow that core meal plan. Make sure that you are really well hydrated. Being hydrated is a really important step. Also can help with leptin sensitivity. So it's a really key factor to consider. There's a little bit of research that adding lemon juice to water, a little bit of lemon to water, can help to reduce cravings. And also, one small study looking at the role of apple cider vinegar was found to help reduce food intake. And another one found that it could help with increasing insulin sensitivity. And the whole story of protein is really important. We talk about protein a lot in our webinars. And what we suggest is as a baseline minimum for everyone, unless you've been told for any medical reason not to have high protein, which there will be a few people potentially, then we would say a minimum of zero point 0.8 of a gram per kilogram of body weight. So work that out based on your current weight, not on your healthy weight. So it's based on where you are now. And you want to divide that over your 3 meals in a day. So, yeah, that is a really, really important step, and it can really help with leptin sensitivity and to help in terms of insulin sensitivity as well. So, those two things go well and well truly together. Yeah.
Absolutely. This slide is quite close to my heart. This whole letting go of the diet mindset, and I know Ruth and I are on the same page with this. We have, as a society, become a bit diet crazy over the years, and what it feels like is that the concept of being on a diet is one, it's a temporary thing. I'm on a diet for this length of time. It's very restrictive. I'm either very good or I'm very bad. It's it sort of puts you in this box. What we really want to talk about over this series of webinars, what we've talked about in the podcast as well, if any of you haven't checked it out, is really it's really changing our attitude to our nutrition, our movement, our managing stress, our sleep, all of these holistic things that and weight loss may be the goal. We think that's the goal, but actually what is the goal? Is it being healthier? Is it feeling better in our bodies? Is it feeling more confident? Is it, reducing our joint pain or improving our metabolic health markers, that sort of thing? We will all have our own reasons, and we have a whole webinar talking about our why and our mindset. But in terms of being on a diet, we really want to look at changing the way we eat for life and loving those foods that love us back. This really fundamental recognition that our health and the way we fuel our body is a daily choice, and the way we enjoy our food. We want you to enjoy your food and your movement and your life and your health. That's really what this is about. We want to support you to choose to make those healthy decisions about what you eat for the long term, and trying to adopt and make those habits your own. This really is a long-term lifestyle approach, learning those new habits that work for you and finding new ways to enjoy your food. So we don't want to really be focusing on restriction. It's okay to have treats at times. We talk about the 80-20 approach. So 80% of the time you're on track and you're really making those healthful choices. 20% of the time, go to that birthday party, enjoy that glass of wine or that birthday cake or what have you, but come back to it. If we're really restrictive on ourselves, it's quite hard to maintain that if we go from, this kind of boom and bust kind of mentality, feast or famine. We can't, we're not really made to stick with something like that. We have to have some leeway and we have to understand that this is a long-term change. It's not a done over, a month or two. This is likely for most of us going to be a longer term change to reach the goals that we've set for ourselves, but also to really support our long-term health, to really change the way we think about food. And for some of us, that will be learning a bit about nutrition, about foods, about protein, about carbs, about fiber, about fats, and how we can incorporate those elements into a healthy diet going forwards. And there's no shame in that, and there's no judgment. Lots of us don't, weren't taught, don't know, and it's great that you guys are here to learn a little bit and hopefully incorporate some of that the habits and the practices that we're talking about into your days going forwards.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And don't, again, it's not about beating ourselves up. It's about being works in progress, isn't it? We're all works in progress. I don't really
Absolutely.
know many
Masterpieces in progress.
masterpieces in progress. That sounds like a really interesting title for some things. Okay, so let's really put some thought into this. I think it really is important for us to all start checking in with ourselves. So if you're somebody, a lot of people today have said, yes, cravings are really real and that they happen very regularly. So I guess what that's telling me is that there's room for improvement in terms of how you're balancing what you're eating and also what you're expecting of yourselves. And we do talk about this a lot, the whole psychology of weight management and the messages we tell ourselves is a really important factor in all of this. If we tell ourselves that we have cravings and we can't ignore them and that we give in to them, then guess what? I mean, the story is we are what we tell ourselves. So if we are repeatedly telling ourselves, well, I just can't deal with these cravings, I always give in to them, then I can guarantee that's what's going to happen. So I guess one of the things we need to also learn to do is actually challenge our self-beliefs and also hear what the messages are that we're giving ourselves in this whole process. And we will talk about that more in the whole psychology webinar. But I think it is a really important thing to bring here today as well, because we do need to start challenging our self-belief around these things. So, what I'd really, really love you to start doing is to check in with yourself and just think, well, have I recently eaten? If I ate 2 or 3 hours ago, did I have enough protein with my meal? Is that the thing that's tripping me up here? And is that something I need to pay some more attention to so that I can get rid of these cravings going forwards? Start recognizing, even if you just start by paying attention over the next few days or week and you don't make any significant changes, but you actually just bring your attention to this whole craving story and actually figure out for yourself what's triggering it. Is it always stress? Is it always an event that happens in your life? Is it always a person that you talk to? Is it that you just aren't eating in a way that's sustaining you long enough? And really start thinking about what those patterns are, what's going on for you. Because once you start taking control and seeing those patterns, you can make a huge difference. We then
Yeah.
think it's time to really start getting organized and actually putting in place the things that are going to beat them up. Would you agree with that, Sam? We're going to say something important there.
Yeah, I was just wondering if Ravdina, you could share the food and mood diary because I think that's a
Oh,
really
great idea.
great first step to help support Ruth exactly what you said about let's just let's get quite strategic with it and like, okay, what am I doing right now? Where can I make little changes and not trying to change everything all at once because we know that doesn't work. Really steady changes, you know, pick pick one thing that you can see, oh, I actually don't have any protein in my breakfast, and maybe I should make that change.
Yeah.
Um, I just saw a quick question in the chat box. The protein formula that Ruth shared is for the whole day. So you split that into your 3 meals or your 2 meals a day, and uh, yeah, use it that way.
Yeah. So I guess just also bringing you back to thinking about what you can do instead. So distraction can really help. So just actually just taking your mind away from that craving, giving yourself a few props ready to use. So it could be that you do a little quiz on your phone, a Sudoku or some Wordle or something like that. If those are the things that you enjoy, it could be that you go out and get some fresh air and you take some deep breaths in fresh air, and that just is the distraction. Some people find that if they clean their teeth, that can be really helpful, and they sort of like, just different strategies for each of us. Talking to a friend, um, reading a book for 5 minutes, even if it's just like a 5 minute break from work and getting away from your computer sometimes and just changing the whole story of what's going on around you can make all the difference. So start thinking about what you could do differently as well and almost be prepared. I think we have to be prepared. If we know this is something that's affecting us regularly, we need to do something about it and we need to change our patterns of behavior. So I think it's about taking control, isn't it? So,
Absolutely.
yeah, that is everything we wanted to share with you today. We have more webinars coming up. Next week, we're going to be talking about sleep and the importance of sleep and how to sleep better, and how that can be really supportive for weight management. And then on the 18th of November, we are talking about stress and building resilience, to support weight management. And we have our final poll. So be really interested to hear from you what you might do differently as a result of being here today, to manage those cravings, which seem like they really do affect 90 or more percent of everyone who's here today. So thank you. Sam, any last thoughts or comments?
I would just your last slide just brought into mind sometimes when we think we're really hungry, we're actually thirsty. So that's sometimes a helpful one. So one of the, strategies I sometimes suggest to people is like have a herbal tea or, have something and really be because it also gives you a little activity, the boiling the kettle, finding, getting the tea bag ready or the leaves ready. There's a sort of little ritual to it. And I think that can be quite a nice distraction that you can be quite mindful about if you're finding, the sort of snack cravings uh, are cropping up.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think sometimes we put so much emphasis, don't we, on food and how important it is. And we do talk about hydration in our food orientated webinars. But I think we forget how important it is to be properly hydrated. So that is definitely something for everyone as well. Making sure that you are adequately hydrated is a key here. Absolutely. There's a strange question on the bottom of the poll, so I'm sorry about that. I have no idea what that is. So, untitled question. Goodness.
Yeah,
Okay.
just ignore. That's all fine.
Please ignore. Yes. Any thoughts you'd like to share, please pop them into the chat box. Thank you. So I can see based on everything that people are going to start their day. That's the number one answer is going to start their day with a protein-rich breakfast.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Really, really like that. That is number one of the things that people are going to do. So 60% of you have said that you're going to do that. So that is fantastic news. And then prioritizing sleep, stress, and water. Really good. And yeah, fantastic. And being mentally prepared. Great. So I'm going to end that poll and I'm going to stop the slides. And we're going to come over to your questions. So let's go
Yeah.
for it. Great. Oh, okay. Right. So, first question. I used to have a savoury tooth and never used to crave sweet things, but since starting on a weight loss medication, I seem to be craving sweet things all the time. Why could that be? Goodness, that's an interesting question. Sam, any thoughts from you?
Hmm. I haven't heard that before. Sometimes when we think of savory tooth, and I know that they're very different, sweet tooth and savory tooth, but if you think about the sort of savory things, so for example, if you really crave crisps or something like that, those are potatoes, so they're quite easily broken down again into sugars. So you get the kind of similar blood sugar change if you had a bag of crisps, and plus, of course, you've got the salt, and I know in a chocolate bar you have all sorts of other things in a chocolate bar too, but just to bear that in mind. I'm not sure. That's a very interesting question. I have not heard that before, that someone's sort of taste has changed. I would go to basics. Where is the protein in your diet? Are you having protein in your breakfast, in your lunch, in your dinner? And if we advise that it's best if you eat well at your meals so that you don't need to snack in between. But if you are having a snack in between, what is that snack? And is it a high glycemic snack? Could it be a bit better? Could it be something that that kind of gives you a little bit of a sweet hit if that's what you need, but maybe in a healthier way. So there's sort of dried fruit with some nuts, with some yogurt or something similar. I haven't heard that. That's interesting.
I'm
I would
wondering.
probably use the food and symptom diary to monitor that and see where you're
But
going
also,
with it.
is there a psychological element going on for you? I'm not suggesting that there is, but it is really interesting that people will often find when they go into a health kick or on a diet, which is what we want to move away from as much as possible, that's when those cravings can kick in because psychologically you know you can't have those foods even if you wanted them. I'm not suggesting it is that, but for some people that may be a factor. So I'm from if dried fruits aren't for you, I would suggest that you go for some fresh berries. They can be a good alternative, and that would be what I would personally choose. Or even the frozen berries are a good option, and they're as nutritionally as beneficial as the fresh variety and keep a little bit more easily so we don't have spoiled foods. So see how you go with that. Interesting question. Somebody's asking if we blend low glycemic foods like spinach or kale, does that break down the fiber and make them into high glycemic foods?
Mm.
I believe from what I have read that that wouldn't be the case as long as you are keeping the whole element of that leaf in your smoothie. If you were juicing and you were discarding, I don't know if anybody's ever made a juice, but quite often when you make a juice, you get all of the juice out and you then have all of the fiber sitting in one compartment and you have the juice in the other. So when it's just juice, yes, you're getting rid of the fiber. So the glycemic effect of the juice is going to be quite considerably different. If you're putting it into a smoothie and you're maintaining all of the nutritional element of the food and it's just all going in, then the fiber stays in that food. And so it should still be relatively good in terms of the fiber content. Yeah. So it shouldn't affect the glycemic load as much. That makes absolute sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. What about porridge with seeds and yogurt on top? Um, that sounds good. What do you think, Ruth? As a breakfast, I'm assuming that sounds rather nice.
Yeah.
I'd probably add some. I I personally really like dried fruit. You always have it in moderation. You don't sort of have a whole bag of it. You probably know that already, but I just want to make sure that I'm not encouraging the wrong thing. It would be sort of like two figs. I like a dried fig, so like two dried figs. I would chop those up and put them through a breakfast like that with some oats and Greek yogurt and I seeds, and I like nuts too. I would probably add nuts too. What do you think, Ruth?
Yeah, I think or maybe overnight oats is great. So
Mm.
making sure you've got that yogurt and some good whole oats so that you've really got the sort of very fibrous option of those oats rather than the sort of like the more processed ones. And then maybe adding in a healthy fat, so a little bit of avocado perhaps, or some nuts and seeds. So because we know that those healthy fats can really help in terms of leptin sensitivity and insulin sensitivity too. So they really need to come in as much as you can find a way of squeezing them in. So nuts for many people, seeds, good options as well. So yeah, that for some people that really works. For others, No, that isn't the answer. And we are a little bit more unique than us all being able to eat the same thing and all be really healthy. So it's about playing with your food and seeing, okay, if you have that porridge, how long does it hold you for? How long before you're getting to the point where you're feeling really hungry? Some people will find it will last for hours. Others will interestingly notice that they're quite hungry quite quickly afterwards. So in which case it's worth trying something different. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a good question here about what is it about our brains that are insisting on these happy neurotransmitters? Why are they wanting fuel as a response to stress? Um, so our happy neurotransmitters are quite addictive. That's what gives us there are reward centers. So why do we want reward? Because they're feel good chemicals in our brain. So dopamine gives us this real like, yes, I did it kind of feeling of this sort of achievement and attainment. And it's just part of being a human being. I think that that's part of our wiring. Um, why do we want fuel as a response to stress? Well, if you think about stress being fight or flight, needing quick release energy to run away from the tiger or whatever it is in that sort of this very primal instinct we have of when we're under stress to want to have sort of high glycemic foods, you can sort of trace it back to that really. Um, Oh, Ruth, do you want to go over the protein equation again?
Yeah,
I
sure.
think a few people. I think yeah, it's a useful thing.
It's a useful thing. So it is, so take your body weight, so weigh yourself, convert your weight from stones to kilos. You can do that very easily online. So it's a really simple thing to do. And then when you know what your weight is in kilograms, you simply multiply that anywhere you like on a calculator on your phone or online by zero point 0.8. And that will tell you how much protein you need to eat in a 24-hour period. And so then if you're eating 3 meals a day, which is sort of our recommended starting point for everyone, then you would divide that by three, and that would be the amount of protein we'd recommend that you had per meal. So it is, people can be quite surprised by how much protein they need. It can be quite significantly more than they've had before. And if it is a big jump from where you are currently, then it might be worth just building that up gradually so that your guts don't go into complete lockdown because you've changed your diet so dramatically. But see how you go with that. It's really worth taking the time to work that out and give yourself that space to just really build that in. Um, Somebody's asking about snacking here. So, should we avoid healthy snacks as a crutch, and start recognizing that we're not hungry and push through by having water or distraction? I would say yes, as much as you can. Obviously, the aim here is that we don't starve ourselves. No one's asking any one of us to do that, including ourselves. But I think it's about relearning what food is for. Food is a nourishment that is here to provide the fuel for us to repair and to grow and to, get through life. So I think it's a really interesting relearning because we have become so bombarded with foods and with snack items that are available 24/7 that we've almost forgotten that we don't need to eat all the time. So I think we have to really step back and think, okay, I've eaten a really good meal, my protein's right, I've got those healthy fats in, I've got some fiber going on there with my vegetables. Okay, I shouldn't be hungry. So is this real hunger or is this a craving? If it's a craving, then it's time to say, okay, distraction strategies to the fore here. What can we do? It's almost like learning new strategies, isn't it? We are always going to have a time when a snack is the thing that really gets us off the floor and keeps us going for the rest of the day when we're just too tired and we can't put it all together. So a healthy snack in that instance is great. But for me, every time you eat, and Sam, this is right, isn't it? You your body is going to have to produce some insulin. And what we want is to produce as little insulin as we need to for those 3 meals a day. Keep them to a low glycemic sort of type of intake, get that protein right, get those fats right, make your body work for you. We can retune our bodies. And I think this is what we're talking about is how we get our bodies to work healthily for us. So that's why this becomes really important. So I hope that helps.
We talked about the reasons why we get cravings. So we talked about lack of sleep. We talked about stress. And there was one more, Ruth, that's just popped out of my mind. There are three reasons why we get our cravings. And really addressing those factors and looking at how we're building our meals around, yes, we get cravings because we're stressed, but maybe the cravings wouldn't be so strong if we had actually had a really good lunch or, had a good breakfast where we incorporated the protein that we've been talking about. Um, and I think in that sense, someone's asked about how do we stop our brains from making us crave things. It is really looking at those factors of how do we manage our stress? Are we sleeping enough? Are we building our plates in the most helpful way for us? Are we keeping hydrated really well with some nice clear fluids? There are factors to look at, and they're not complex ones either. I think they're manageable, and sometimes it takes a bit of time and a bit of sort of reflection on looking at where is that stress coming from? What's happening? What's going on with my sleep? And can I improve things in this area?
Yeah, very much so. Somebody's asking for some ideas for high protein breakfast. So there's probably on some of the meal plans that we have that are downloadable, there are some suggestions, but things like eggs, if you eat eggs, that's great. Some people will scramble tofu, and that can be a really good alternative, and very high in protein. You could have nuts and seeds, you could have fish. Really, the sky is the limit. It's any protein that you're happy to eat anyway that you would be happy to have at breakfast. So I think we need to throw the rule book out, get rid of those cereal rich breakfasts as much as possible and start thinking, okay, what do I enjoy? What foods would I be happy to have at breakfast? And you could have some smoked salmon and some avocado. That'd be like a really healthy, fat rich breakfast. Yogurt, quinoa, you could make a quinoa based porridge. Again, that would be, again, really sort of something that would be very protein rich. It is about you, and it's about finding those foods and actually it's about just cottage cheese, somebody saying cheese omelette, fantastic idea. Yeah, all of those things. It's just about figuring out the foods, and just rethinking, because I think we get stuck in ruts, don't we?
Absolutely.
Okay, there's some really people. Yes, you will be able to rewatch the webinar. Welcome to you for your first time of coming along. I hope it's been helpful. We will be sharing the link, and there is now a YouTube space where all of the webinars that have been recorded are going to be available week by week. So we post them up. Will be posted later today or tomorrow. It is an unedited version, so it is just as it happens, just so you know. How much sugar per meal is appropriate, or what is classed as high sugar? So thank you for asking that question. Sam, shall I start and then you take over, or do you want to jump in?
Sorry, I was just looking at the slides again. Sorry, what was the question, Ruth?
High sugar. So what's classed? So
Ah,
I think the
mm,
government recommend a maximum of 30 grams of added sugar per day. That's still quite a lot, actually. Um, Look at the core meal plan. Look at low glycemic foods. That's where you want to be basing your meals around the sort of like the basic foods that are not man-made, that we can cook from scratch. The more of that we do, the less sugar we're going to have in our food. Obviously, realistically, we're all living quite crazy busy lives, and cooking from scratch may be something you only manage a couple of times a week. But if you can bulk make meals and have some in the fridge, then that's perfect. You may not be able to do that. Don't beat yourselves up. Just try and base it around basic foods and have a look on a label of a food. And I think it's something like less than 5 grams of sugar per 100 grams is then considered a sort of healthy amount. So see how you go with that. That might be helpful.
there's a good comment in here. Bev has made the saying just eat yogurt. When I say yogurt, I mean Greek yogurt, sort of just plain Greek yogurt, not fruit not sweetened, and it sort of ties into the sugar question as well. The sort of really, I would probably go for the full fat Greek yogurt. There are lower fat versions if you prefer, but actually I think that it's um, this sort of live yogurt has other benefits in it as well. So I would go for that. What do you think, Ruth, in terms of yogurt being um, a good or a bad option?
Yeah, yogurt can be great. I think what I read some time ago is if you are trying to lose weight, you may want to go for the lower fat variety of yogurt just because it's got less calories in. But that's a whole story all by itself. Just look at the protein content per 100 grams and go for the higher protein content of the natural yogurts. There are a couple of yogurts now available, I think, on the market which have really good protein levels. For that, I won't mention brands here because I don't think we're particularly allowed to. But yeah, but there are.
Yeah,
They're
that's
just
really helpful, Ruth. Thank you. And it's a good point because I think I have made assumptions, but yeah, it's the plain yogurt that we're talking about and adding our own sort of whole foods to, yeah, like adding our own plain foods to it. Um, yeah.
Um, So yeah, people are just talking about this craving sugar on the weight loss medications. Do write in if you're a Boots online customer. Do feel free to write in, and we'll take a look at your situation with that and see if we can answer any strange queries that have come up for you.
Yeah, and it's good for the team to know if you're a Boots customer, if there's sugar cravings are a real thing, there might be a pattern there. It's not something that I am particularly aware of, that this, these are relatively new medications, but also looking at what are you eating over the day? What have you had for breakfast? What have you had for lunch? What could be influencing the cravings outside of the medication as well. So it could be to do with the medication itself, but it might not be. So it's worth sort of reflecting on um, all the different behaviors that might have influenced that particular craving. But it's interesting, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. So, and especially if there are a few people who have noticed the same thing.
And we can report that and let the powers that be know that that is something that people are experiencing because it's really helpful. As you say, Sam, it's a new medication.
Mm.
Somebody's saying that after eating, you almost start that can almost trigger cravings for that person. And then, so after eating, we'll then find that they snack more on snacky foods. I think there might be an argument that you need to slow your eating down. It can be sort of, I think it's 20 minutes before we get that sort of signal that we're feeling fuller. Sometimes our brains can be a little bit slower at getting the message that we are satiated from our food, that we've had food. So sometimes our brains can be a little lagging behind. So we almost get into that eating frenzy. So I think just slow everything down, make sure you're chewing really well. Start your food. There's a couple of things that are talked about in different circumstances. So maybe starting your meal with a bite of protein first to really help with that satiety. I don't think there's a huge amount of research, but anecdotally, I think it is thought to be helpful. So that may help. And really, just, when you've had enough, you need to just give yourself a very clear message and say, you'll go back and re-eat in another 4 hours if you're still hungry. Then you need to provide ourselves with reassurance. Sometimes we forget, and just make sure you're filling your plate up adequately, getting that balance right, and see how you get on with that. Sam, somebody's put a comment in here that they are actually having no sweet cravings at all. So there's the flip side of the coin with the weight loss medications. So thank you for that. And actually finding it difficult to work out what you actually do want to eat. We do come across that a fair amount. So thank you for sharing that.
Mm. Yeah,
Somebody's
start with a core meal plan and go from there, I'd say. If you're kind of almost at a bit of a blank slate, just
yeah.
see if that helps you sort of build from that point.
Yes, there are a couple of I'll have a look. Somebody's asking about understanding the actual nutrition content of food as opposed to the weight of the food. You can actually Google nutrition content of food, or you can look in your search engine, and that will come up with a couple of possible areas where you can get that information. It is worth looking at that. That's a really good point. So thank you. I don't think we've got that information broken down in a handout, have we, Sam? So, like, 100 grams of chicken, for example, will only yield something like 24 grams of protein. So that's something we could think to create, but it is available online. So do have
Yeah.
a look.
Yeah. Um, Other questions. Okay. Examples of protein-rich breakfast. So I
I
think
think
we've
we've done that,
talked
have
about yeah, Greek yogurts. We've talked about eggs, kippers,
we?
anything that you really nuts are high protein. So if you have a look at the core meal plan, because we do talk about different options that you can, in the protein column that you could have for breakfast. So have a think about that. Um, I'm not sure that we can really give advice about vitamin tablets, honestly. It would be quite specific. A good multi if you're not having a much vegetable. There's a question in the question Q&A box about not having many vegetables in your diet. Vegetables also provide fiber, so we want to think about where you're getting your fiber from as well as the phytonutrients within. So a good multivitamin with minerals is a good idea. We're not going to be able to advise on a brand, unfortunately, but also thinking where you're getting your fiber from if you're not for for your own reasons not able to eat vegetables in the quantities that you'd ideally want to. Um, yeah.
Great. Also, I'm just going to quickly pick up on the sugar-free drink question, which has been popped into the chat box. I've just seen it now. We really recommend avoiding those as much as you possibly can. It is going to trigger off potentially all of those cravings. It's going to pop you over onto that red side of the chart. It's going to give you all of those blood sugar imbalance symptoms. So we very much do recommend not having that.
Because you get the same insulin response,
Yeah.
basically, because these are all quite newfangled things, sugar-free, different sugar substitutes, and the body is just not really sure what to do with them. So you will get the same insulin response. So, it, they can look like the healthier choice, but really they're not. I would also, unfortunately, say the same. Honey is also basically sugar. So unfortunately, you're also going to spike your sugars and your insulin response with honey. I think honey has other benefits, but we're talking about blood sugar in this webinar. So I would also be, I would say if you can not put honey in your drinks, that would be better in terms of your blood sugar balance.
Very much. Okay, well, that brings us very now to the end of today's webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Rabdina, if you could share the link to the podcasts, they're a great in between catch up. If anybody would like to listen to those, do feel free to. And we will share the link to anyone who has registered for the webinar by email later on today / tomorrow. So you are able to rewatch if that's helpful to you. And we're looking at all about sleep. So do come along and you can bring along your questions next week as well.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for your excellent questions. You've made us really work for it today. So I feel like you've asked some really great questions. Thank you so much.
Right.
We will see you next week.
Take care. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Rabdino. And thanks
Bye.
to everyone who was with us today. Bye, everyone.